Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week we're going to be talking about nailers, staple guns, and glue guns. And we'd like to thank Mona Kirby for liking and sharing the podcast. And we'd also like to thank Player FM. They made us the podcast of the day, one of the days this week. And if you're looking for a good podcast app for Android, it's Player FM. One of the first pneumatic upholstery nailers was developed by Passload in 1959, and they developed the first pneumatic framing nailer. The first patent for a stapler in the U.S. was 1866, and the first patent for a hot glue gun in the U.S. wasn't until 1971.
Wow.
There are a variety of nail guns for projects around the house. You can get a roofing nailer if you plan on installing your own shingles.
Does it do anything else?
Well, some of these...
Or you'll just use it once every, 15, 20 years?
Well, what's cool is some will not only do roofing, but they'll do exterior drywall, insulation, and siding.
So yes, to my question.
Yeah, much more versatile. And you can also control the depth of the nail, so you're not driving it through the material that you're working on or leaving it too high.
Okay.
And the roofing nailers, they're generally going to have nails that come in a coil, and they're held in a round magazine.
Uh-huh.
And those coil-style nailers are usually going to hold more nails than a strip-style magazine, and that way you don't have to refill it as often, which is nice when you're on a roof. Framing nailers are designed for heavy nailing jobs with long nails, so this will do like a 16-penny nail up to 3.5 inches long. This would be if you're nailing together 2x4 lumber. These are great if you plan on building a garage or a shed, if you're finishing a basement, if you plan on building a deck. You can use this for fencing or furniture or subflooring.
Or even building a house.
Right. If you're building a house, you'd want a framing nailer. Flooring nailers for tongue and groove wood flooring and engineered flooring are designed so you don't have to be down on your hands and knees to drive your nails.
So you're standing up?
Yeah, so many of these are going to have a handle that extends up from the gun, so you can hold onto that as an angled foot that prevents damage to the flooring. And then most of these are going to have a bumper that you hit with a rubber mallet, and that fires the nail into the wood.
Huh.
And some of these flooring nailers are going to have multiple feet, so you can get different size or shape feet to match the project you're working on. And this is much better than using a hammer. You're less likely to damage the flooring. And some of these, without the handle or a bumper, they work like a standard nail gun.
Uh-huh.
So you can get a flooring nail gun that can be converted from that angled foot to a standard tip, and then you can use it for other projects. So now you can use it for trim work.
Okay.
So much more versatile. But the problem with those, if you're doing a lot of flooring jobs, is you have to be down on the floor.
Bummer.
Finish nailers are going to drive finishing nails, usually 14 to 16 gauge nails, inch to 2.5 inches long. And you're going to be using this for baseboard, furniture, molding, flooring, cabinets, paneling. They have a very small head.
You just love making lists, don't you?
I do. So when you put a finishing nail, let's say you're putting it in trim, generally you're using a hammer, you pound it close to the surface, and then you end up using a nail set, so that metal rod that you hit with a hammer to get the head just under the surface, and then you use a little wood putty. So this is great. If you're doing a lot of trim around the house, you can set your gun, and it will indent it for you. A brad nailer is going to work with smaller nails, so these are generally 18 gauge, and you can get these 5/8 to around 2 inches long. So this is great for most trim work. It doesn't have the holding power of a thicker finishing nail, but the brad nails can be used for baseboard, quarter round, window trim, door and patio trim, crown molding, picture rail. I got more. You can use it for crafts. So this is great to use with wood glue also for furniture and cabinet repair. It'll hold it together while that glue is setting up. And having a nail gun like this that uses nails 1/2 inch to 2 inches gives you a lot of different options. And the smaller, thinner nails are good for thin pieces of wood where a finishing nail might split it. And many of the brad nailers will also work with staples, so you can do even more types of projects.
Wow, exciting.
There are pin nailers, generally around 23 gauge, very thin nails without a head. And this is for delicate work, so if you're doing crafts or very small trim. There's three main types of nail guns: pneumatic, battery, or gas-powered. and the gas-powered are sometimes called fuel cell. The pneumatic tools are generally the least expensive, and they're going to work with an air compressor. So if you have an air compressor, before you shop for a nail gun, you need to know the CFMs or the SCFMs of your compressor. And SCFMs is the standard cubic feet per minute. So I have a compressor that's 2.4 CFMs at 90 PSI. You might have 2.6 SCFM at 90 PSI or 3.8 CFMs at 90 PSI. You need to match the tools you're looking at to the specifications of your compressor.
That was a lot of numbers.
And you also want to have a little extra pressure above what the tool's rated for.
Okay.
So one brad nailer I looked at was 0.1 SCFM at 90 PSI. A flooring nailer I looked at was 2.2 SCFM at 70 PSI. And a finish nailer was 3.4 SCFM at 70 PSI. So, for example, my compressor that's 2.4 would not work with that finish nailer. So you need to know what the specifications of your compressor are and match that up. And if you plan on buying a compressor and a nail gun, there's kits that have both. Generally, you're going to get a better price and their size to work together, so you don't have to know all those numbers. Cordless nailers that have a rechargeable battery are great for tight areas if you're working on ladders.
What do you mean, tight areas?
So one of the problems with pneumatic nailers is they have kickback, and if you're working in a tight area, it can actually hit the back of the gun and cause it to double fire, which could potentially be dangerous.
I still don't understand what a tight area means.
So if you don't have a lot of room for the gun, there's not a lot of room for kickback, like with a pneumatic nailer.
But give me an example. Like in a cabinet?
In a cabinet. So if you're putting nails somewhere and there's not a lot of room behind the back of the gun, that's a tight area. So the cordless nailers are good for tight areas, Cindy.
Yeah, okay.
Convenient on ladders if you're working on small projects. And for the bigger projects, I would probably have a backup battery and then always have it charging. They're nice because you have no air hose to drag around. You don't have the noise of a compressor.
Or the air compressor to drag around.
Right, or that. And some of the cordless nailers have LED work lights. A cordless fuel-powered nailer has a disposable gas cartridge, and this actually creates combustion inside the nailer to drive the nails. It uses a battery to create a spark for the combustion. It has a microprocessor to run a fan and monitor the system. And pass load. They developed one of the first fuel-powered nailers, and pass load is PASLODE. The fuel-powered nailers are going to handle heavy-duty jobs where some of the battery-operated nailers aren't going to be able to handle the very long framing nails. So one thing you should check on the cordless battery-operated nailers is the maximum nail size, but the cordless batteries are getting much more powerful and longer-lasting. When you're picking your nails for your projects, you can get paper, plastic, or metal collated nails. So a strip of nails is held together and that's going to fit into the gun's magazine. The paper collated has paper that tears away as each nail is driven into the wood. So there's less debris. One of the disadvantages is if you're in wet conditions, it can damage the paper that's holding all the nails together. For plastic collated, there's small plastic bits that fly off, and so you're going to have to clean up that debris. In really hot weather, it can gum up over time, or it can potentially cause a jam. With the metal collated nails, you have little bits of metal that you have to clean up, and you also have to be careful how you position the gun, because those metal particles can fly out and hit you.
So you should probably wear goggles.
Impact-resistant goggles for a lot of reasons.
Maybe a helmet.
Most nails will have a lubricant coating. Some nail strips are held together with a resin or adhesive, and when the nail is driven into the wood, friction melts the adhesive and it adds to the holding power. For framing, you can get standard nails with a round head or a clipped head. And
what's a clipped head?
So the metal is clipped off on one side, so it almost looks like a D shape, the top of it. And this allows the nails to be packed together tighter in a strip so you can get more nails in the magazine. But there are some building codes that don't allow clipped head nails, so I would check with my local village if you're doing a big structure or if you're pulling a permit to see whether they're allowed. The CDC says there's about 37,000 emergency room visits every year because of nail guns, and some have resulted in deaths. So nail guns have a spring-loaded tip that must be pressed against the work surface to fire, and you also have to pull a trigger. NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, recommends using a nail gun with full sequential firing for safety. So with this mode, you first press the spring-loaded tip fully down onto the work material, then you pull the trigger, and then you have to release the trigger and lift up the gun to reset the tip.
Okay.
So it's much more difficult to get injured with this method. A nail gun with a single shot mode allows you to pull the trigger to load a nail, and then you press the tip into your wood to fire the nail. Then you have to release the trigger, pull the trigger again to load the next nail. But the problem is, if you've loaded the next nail and you accidentally bump the tip into your leg or foot, you can definitely cause an injury. There's also a mode called bump fire or contact fire. As long as you're holding down the trigger, you can just keep bumping the tip into a hard surface, and that's considered the most dangerous method of using a nail gun. I have some safety tips.
Okay.
You don't want to exceed the maximum air pressure that's recommended for the gun. It's usually around 125 psi, and many companies recommend only using their nails because of the different coatings that could be on it. You never want to load nails with the air hose, battery, or the fuel connected. And when you're carrying the gun or holding the gun, make sure your finger is off the trigger. You don't want to drive nails too close to the edge of the material. It can split or ricochet. And you want to keep your free hand about 12 inches away from the gun tip. If you're nailing up wood sheathing, you don't want anyone behind it in case you miss a stud. It could cause an injury. It can go actually right through the paneling. And only use your dominant hand to operate a nail gun. You want to disconnect the hose or the power source when you're clearing a jam, adjusting the depth, or if you're not using the tool. And then check for knots, nails, or screws, anything that could cause a ricochet. Always wear eye protection. You want impact-resistant goggles. You don't want to carry or lift a gun by an air hose. And then be careful in tight areas, Cindy, because of double fire.
Thank you, JC.
Check your manual to see how often you should lubricate your nailer. Many of the pneumatic nailers need to be lubricated with a few drops of oil before every day's use, and you want to use an air tool lubricant. Some of the cordless nailers I looked at say lube it every 50,000 cycles.
So what, are you supposed to count?
Keep track, Cindy. Some of them have air filters that you need to clean regularly. You want to check all the screws, nuts, bolts, and pins on the tool before each use. Test the tip and the trigger that it's working properly. So you want to press the tip into a piece of wood without pulling the trigger, and it shouldn't fire a nail. And then pull the trigger with the tip above the wood, and it shouldn't fire a nail. And then you want to make sure that you're cleaning your tool after every day's use. When you're shopping for nail guns, some features to look for or compare: depth adjustment, and look for one that doesn't require a tool. No mar tips are going to protect soft wood. Directional exhaust, easy jam clearing, dry fire lockout. So this means it's not going to fire if there's no nail, so it saves wear and tear on your tool. I would look for a large trigger if you're usually wearing work gloves, belt hook, a carrying case, or a bag, and then look at the range of the nail sizes the guns take. Also, if you're looking at trim guns, will it take nails and staples? I would also go to a hardware store, a home center, and lift the guns, see how heavy they are, the balance, and check how the nails are loaded, because some of them are easy to load, some of them aren't so easy. Some top-rated nail guns: Pass Load, Bostitch, it's Bostitch, Makita, Wen, Wen, Hitachi, Hitachi, DeWalt, Numax, it's Numax, and Estwing, Estwing.
Why didn't you spell Makita? You spelled everything else.
Makita.
Oh, and DeWalt, you didn't spell either.
Dewalt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. With staple guns, they come manual, electric, or pneumatic, and the electric can either be corded or battery operated, and these are handy for projects around the house.
Do you have a list?
Yes. So repairing fabric on furniture, upholstering furniture, insulation, crafts, door and window screen, carpeting. You can hold up wire or cable.
What are you going to do with door and window screen with a staple gun?
If you have an older home and you have a wooden frame, we put in a lot of screening with a staple gun, like in some of the old houses.
Nice.
Manual staple guns are going to be less expensive. They don't require a lot of maintenance. And these are good to test out at the store because some require quite a bit of force to operate them. And that handle can close towards the back or towards the front. Electric staple guns have more power for going through harder wood or driving longer staples. And these are good for big projects. The pneumatic staple guns are good if you have a compressor for other tools, or you can get a staple gun that also drives brad nails so you can use it for more projects.
Exciting.
There are three main types of staples. You have a chisel point staple, and this drives straight into wood. There's a divergent point, so one side of the staple is angled opposite the other side. So as it goes into the wood, it actually twists to give it more holding power. And then there's a high crown staple, so the top of the staple has an arch to it, and as it's driven into the wood, it flattens out and puts outward pressure on the staple, and it gives it more holding power. Some top-rated staple guns: Arrow, Bostitch, DeWalt, Stanley, Wen, Porter Cable, Makita, and Ryobi. It's R-Y-O-B-I. A hot glue gun has some advantages over using a wood glue or an all-purpose liquid glue for projects. The glue sticks are going to last for years, where once you open most liquid glues, they start to harden.
Right.
And then that hot glue is going to dry very quickly, and you can use it on a wide range of materials. This is good for crafts, for woodworking, upholstery, and furniture. The glue usually comes in cylindrical sticks and is pushed into the back of the gun. When you pull the trigger, the glue's pulled to the tip where it gets melted and pushed out. So the glue guns can be corded or cordless. There's a couple different size sticks, so you want to make sure you're matching your glue size to your gun. And you have different types of glue for different projects. You also have low temperature glue and high temperature glue, and then high temperature and low temperature glue guns.
It's nice to have a paper plate when you're using this, so you have some place to place the glue gun when you're not using it.
Okay.
And then also when you first start to pull the trigger, it's nice to have some place to practice on how quickly it's going to come out.
Yeah, I like it.
So I've used glue guns a lot.
Yeah.
For crafts, because I'm crafty.
You can use hot glue for upholstery rather than staples, or you can hold your fabric in place with the glue, and then you can staple it. You can use hot glue to tack multiple pieces of wood together and then cut it with a circular saw. That way your pieces are exactly the same length and you can pry them apart. You can put on baseboard or trim. You can put a drop of glue on a bolt or a screw and lock it in place. I've seen a couple of pros use a drop of hot glue on drawer knobs, and it keeps it from unscrewing. You can seal box flaps so that you can tape it very evenly. You can attach under cabinet lighting with hot glue. You'd want to use the low temperature hot glue for the wiring. And then you can use it as tacking, so you can use wood glue around the perimeter of a piece of wood. So let's say you're putting together furniture or crafts and you want to use wood glue because it has more strength, but it's hard to clamp or you don't want to clamp it. You can put your wood glue on the outside perimeter of your pieces, put a drop of hot glue in the center, and then force them together. The hot glue is going to dry quickly, and then you can use that as a clamp, and then overnight your wood glue is going to dry and you're going to have more strength.
Smart.
You can also use that same concept when you're building things out of wood. Use the hot glue to hold pieces together, then you can run a pilot hole and use screws. When you're comparing glue guns, the bigger triggers are going to be easier to pull, and then look for something that has a stand or built-in feet so that you don't have to worry about where you're laying that tip.
Right.
And Arrow has one with a stand and a plate for the excess glue to drip on, and it holds it up.
That's nice.
Some top-rated glue guns: Arrow, Stanley, Ryobi, DeWalt, and Black & Decker.
Do you have anything else to add?
If you're using a nail gun or a stapler, make sure you're wearing eye protection. You want impact-resistant goggles. Keep your free hand around 12 inches away from the tool. Match your nail gun and your nail size to your project. And if you're planning on doing a lot of remodeling around your house, a brad nailer is probably one of the most versatile tools.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Player FM, CastBox, or your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.